The street was quiet. Too quiet. Sunlight stretched long shadows across cracked sidewalks. Leaves whispered across the pavement. A small figure moved alone. A girl, no older than 11. One hand clutching a backpack strap, the other gripping a worn leather leash. At the end of that leash, a German shepherd. Large, silent, eyes sharp as broken glass. From a distance, they looked vulnerable, an easy target, an open invitation. 3 bikers idled at the corner, engines purring low, helmets hiding their smirks. One revved his motor. The girl flinched. The dog didn't. He watched, measured, calculating, waiting for them to make the first mistake, because they thought they saw a pet. They thought they saw prey. They were wrong. They were about to meet something they couldn't outrun, couldn't fight, couldn't even understand. Not yet. But they would. Her name was Lila Monroe, 11 years old, small for her age, big-hearted beyond her years. She grew up in Willow Creek, a town so quiet, even the crickets seemed to whisper. After her father passed, a soldier, a hero, Lila moved in with her grandmother, and with Blaze. Blaze wasn't just a pet. He was a promise kept, a silent guardian, a living memory, a piece of her father's heart, left behind to watch over her. But Lila didn't know that. Not fully. To her, Blaze was the clumsy puppy who stole her socks, who nudged her hand when she cried, who curled up at the foot of her bed when the nightmares came. He was family, and family meant everything. Willow Creek was safe, predictable, a sleepy town where danger was just a story adults told to make kids behave. Lila believed that. She believed it, until the day 3 men decided to rewrite her story. It started like any other afternoon. A quick trip to the corner store, a bottle of lemonade clinking in her backpack. Blaze trotting happily beside her, tongue lolling. The world was bright, open, ordinary. And then, at the edge of the ordinary, 3 motorcycles, 3 strangers, 3 smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Blaze noticed first, the shift in the air, the crackle of something wrong. His ears pricked forward, his body stiffened. Lila barely glanced up, just a second too late. A second that would change everything. The sound of the engines grew louder. Lila tightened her grip on the leash without even realizing it. Blaze's posture shifted, barely noticeable unless you knew what to look for. He lowered his center of gravity, bracing subtly between Lila and the approaching danger. The 3 bikers slowed down as they reached her. One revved his engine, the harsh sound ripping through the calm like a warning shot. Lila's steps faltered. She clutched the backpack tighter to her side, her mouth dry. The lead biker pulled off his helmet as he rolled to a stop in front of her. His hair was greasy, his smile wide and cold. "Where you headed, sweetheart?" he asked, voice slick with mockery. The second biker chuckled, kicking the stand down on his motorcycle and swinging a leg off with practiced ease. The third, younger, wirier, pulled something from his jacket. A rope. Lila froze. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her legs refused to obey. The lead biker leaned forward. "No need to be scared," he said. "We're just being friendly." Blaze emitted a low growl, deep in his chest. It wasn't loud, but it was a promise. The bikers ignored it. "What's the mutt gonna do, huh?" The second biker sneered, stepping closer. Blaze's body remained utterly still. Lila could feel the tension vibrating through the leash. "Tie her up," the lead biker barked. The wiry one grinned, flipping the rope in his hands. He lunged forward. In that instant, the world seemed to slow. Lila caught a glimpse of Blaze's eyes, focused, unflinching. And then, Blaze moved, fast as lightning, silent as a shadow. He launched himself at the rope-wielding biker, knocking the man flat with a ferocious snarl. The rope skittered uselessly across the pavement. Before the others could react, Blaze turned, a controlled whirlwind of muscle and instinct. The second biker swung a booted foot at him. Blaze ducked low, jaws snapping shut around the man's ankle, not to maim, but to bring him crashing down onto the pavement. The lead biker swore loudly, reaching inside his jacket. A glint of metal caught the dying sunlight. Blaze charged. The man barely had time to lift his arm before Blaze collided with him, teeth locking around his wrist with perfect, trained precision. The gun clattered to the ground. The leader screamed in pain. Blaze released him, backing toward Lila, body tense, ready to defend her against whatever came next. The two remaining bikers stumbled to their feet. Fear flickered in their eyes. This wasn't a pet. This was a warrior. And they were badly outmatched. They scrambled for their bikes, engines roaring to life as they fled down the road, leaving their leader behind, clutching his wrist and cursing through gritted teeth. Lila stood frozen for a moment, the leash still tight in her fist. Then she dropped to her knees beside Blaze, throwing her arms around his broad neck. He leaned into her, his body warm and solid against hers. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the police. Within minutes, flashing lights bathed the street in red and blue. Officers spilled from their cruisers, weapons drawn. They took in the scene quickly. The fallen biker, the discarded rope and gun, the young girl hugging her dog in the middle of it all. One officer knelt beside them. "You okay, sweetheart?" Lila nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "It was Blaze," she said. "He saved me." The officer looked at the dog, recognition dawning in his expression. He reached carefully for Blaze's collar. His fingers brushed a small battered tag. K9 unit, retired. The officer's mouth fell open slightly. He turned to his partner. "This dog's not just a pet. He's trained." Lila's father arrived moments later, skidding to a halt beside the police cars. He swept her into his arms, crushing her against his chest. Tears streaked his weathered face. When he saw Blaze sitting stoically nearby, he fell to his knees, pulling the dog into a rough embrace. "Thank you," he choked out. "Thank you for bringing her home." The aftermath unfolded in a blur. Statements, reports, media vans parking along the street. But Lila didn't care about any of it. She cared about Blaze, the hero who had been there when she needed him most, the silent protector who had fulfilled a promise made long before she ever understood the weight of it. As the sun sank behind the hills, casting long shadows over Willow Creek, Lila sat on the front porch with Blaze. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He thumped his tail once, gently. No words passed between them. None were needed. Because some bonds are forged not in fire, but in faith. And some promises are kept not with grand gestures, but with quiet courage. The next morning, Willow Creek woke to a town transformed. The news had spread like wildfire. Every porch, every sidewalk, every whisper in the bakery lines, all carried the same story. The little girl, the dog, and the bikers who picked the wrong target. But as always happens in small towns, the story grew in the telling. By midday, Blaze wasn't just a retired K9. He was a legend. A ghost of a soldier. A guardian spirit wrapped in fur. The mayor called an emergency meeting. There would be a celebration, he decided. A public recognition. "We honor our heroes here," he said, slapping his hand on the desk. And so the planning began. Meanwhile, Lila sat on her front porch, watching as life buzzed around her. She didn't care about the reporters, the banners, or the sudden fame. All she cared about was Blaze. He sat beside her, as he always did. Quiet, solid, unshaken. The world might roar and spin, but Blaze remained her anchor. That night, under the low hum of porch lights, Lila's father told her the truth she had never fully understood. About her father. About Blaze. About the promise made by a dying man to his loyal dog. Protect her. And Blaze had. Every day. Every heartbeat. Every silent step beside her. The day of the ceremony arrived. Main Street was lined with banners. "Thank you, Blaze." Children waved small flags, faces painted with paw prints. Veterans in dress uniforms stood at attention, saluting as the parade passed. At the front of it all was Lila, in a simple white dress, her hand resting proudly on Blaze's back. He wore no costume, no cape, only his old, battered K9 tag, polished until it gleamed in the sunlight. When they reached the podium, the mayor stepped forward, his voice thick with emotion. "We are here to honor not just bravery, but loyalty. Not just strength, but love." He bent down, pinning a new medal to Blaze's collar. The first medal ever awarded by Willow Creek to a non-human citizen. The crowd roared with applause. Blaze simply wagged his tail once, steady and sure. The festivities stretched into the evening. Bonfires, storytelling, laughter ringing through the streets. But for Lila, the moment that mattered came later. When the crowd had thinned, when the noise had faded. She sat with Blaze under the old oak tree in the park. Above them, the stars blinked awake, quiet witnesses to a bond forged stronger than steel. She rested her forehead against his and whispered, "Thank you for choosing me." Blaze licked her cheek once, a soft exhale of breath warming the cool night air. No fanfare, no speeches, just love, pure and enduring. In the months that followed, Blaze's story traveled far beyond Willow Creek. Articles, news specials, even a children's book dedicated to his courage. But none of it changed the way Lila saw him. To her, Blaze wasn't a hero. He was home. He was safety. He was family. And as Blaze grew older, his steps slowing, his muzzle frosting with white, Lila stayed by his side. The protector had become the protected. She carried him in and out of the house when his legs trembled. She spoon-fed him on days when he was too tired to eat. And every night she lay beside him, whispering stories of all the lives he had touched, until the night he slipped away, peaceful, wrapped in love. And when the town gathered once more, candles flickering against the dark, songs lifted into the stars, they didn't just mourn a dog. They celebrated a legacy, a loyalty that outlasted lifetimes, a courage that echoed in every heart he had touched. Time did not stand still for Lila Monroe. Seasons turned over like pages in an old book. The once small girl who had clutched a leash with trembling fingers grew into a young woman who carried strength quietly, like a second skin. Blaze's memory remained stitched into every fiber of her being. Every step she took forward was a promise kept, a life lived in honor of a loyalty that never asked for recognition. High school passed in a blur of textbooks and football games, late-night studying and whispered memories shared under the old oak tree. When it came time to choose her path, there was no hesitation. Law enforcement. It wasn't just a career. It was a calling. A way to give back what Blaze had given her. Safety. Trust. Hope. Lila entered the academy with a determination that surprised even her instructors. She wasn't the fastest. She wasn't the strongest. But no one questioned her heart. No one doubted her will. During K9 training, Lila's natural affinity for the dogs became impossible to ignore. She didn't command them. She connected with them. Where others shouted orders, Lila whispered trust. Where others relied on force, Lila offered faith. One by one, even the most stubborn trainees surrendered their loyalty to her. Because they saw what Blaze had seen all those years ago. Not weakness, not fear, but strength wrapped in kindness. Fire tempered by compassion. On graduation day, Lila stood tall in her uniform, Valor at her side. Valor, a spirited German shepherd with a heart as wild as the mountains and a loyalty as deep as the oceans. Their bond was instant, unshakable. Not replacing Blaze, never replacing Blaze, but honoring him, carrying his legacy forward, one heartbeat at a time. Lila and Valor became legends in their own right. Search and rescue missions, missing children, disaster zones. Wherever hope was thin and danger thick, they were there. And in every success, every life saved, Lila felt Blaze's spirit smiling beside her. Years later, Lila returned to Willow Creek. Not as a little girl clutching a leash. Not even as a rookie officer. But as a symbol of what could endure. She stood once more in the town square, where Blaze's statue gleamed beneath the summer sun. In her arms, she carried a small, squirming bundle of fur. A puppy. Another beginning. Another story ready to be written. She knelt, setting the puppy down at the base of Blaze's statue. The pup sniffed the bronze paw, then wagged its tail. Lila smiled through tears. "This is where it all started," she whispered, "and where it will always continue." The townspeople gathered again, just as they had years ago. Only now, they weren't there to mourn. They were there to celebrate. Generations of children who had grown up with stories of Blaze and Lila clapped and cheered as Valor, now gray-muzzled but proud, led the new puppy in a slow, clumsy march across the square. It wasn't just a parade. It was a passing of the torch. Later that night, under a sky dusted with stars, Lila sat alone by Blaze's statue. She traced the worn lettering with her fingertips. Loyalty. Courage. Love. 3 simple words that had built a life. Her life. She closed her eyes, feeling the soft brush of memory against her heart. A warm weight leaning against her side. The steady rhythm of a heartbeat that had never really left her. "I'm still carrying you," she whispered into the night. And somewhere, she knew, Blaze was running free beneath a sky too vast to hold sorrow, watching over her still. Because some promises never end, some bonds never break, and some legacies, the best ones, are written not in monuments or medals, but in the quiet, steady ways we choose to live, to love, to protect. The seasons cycled again, as relentless and beautiful as ever. Willow Creek grew. New families moved in. Old ones built new wings to their homes. Children, who once sat wide-eyed listening to tales of Blaze and Lila, now had children of their own. But some things never changed. Every year, on the anniversary of that fateful day, the town gathered in the square. Not to mourn, to remember, to celebrate, to remind themselves that even the smallest moments of bravery could ripple outward, shaping generations. Lila became the chief of the K-9 unit in the county. Under her guidance, the program expanded, training not just dogs, but handlers to understand what Blaze had taught her so long ago. Trust, patience, unbreakable loyalty. Valor passed quietly one fall evening, his head resting on Lila's lap, a gentle sigh his final farewell. The pain of that loss carved deep, but Lila had learned long ago that love always leaves marks. It was a price she would pay 1,000 times over. In Valor's honor, the Academy erected a second statue beside Blaze's. 2 guardians, side by side. A silent promise to every soul who walked past that courage never truly dies. Years stretched forward. Lila trained hundreds of handlers, thousands of dogs. She spoke at conferences, wrote books, inspired countless others to see service not as duty, but as devotion. Yet she always returned to Willow Creek, to the square, to the roots that had grown into everything she was. And every time she laid a hand on the bronze muzzle of Blaze's statue, she felt it. The heartbeat beneath the metal. The echo of footsteps that never faded. The bond that time could only strengthen. On her 50th birthday, the town threw a surprise celebration. There were balloons, music, stories shared late into the night. At the heart of it all, Lila stood with a leash in her hand. Not empty. Never empty. At the end of that leash was a young K-9 trainee, bright-eyed, restless, filled with the wild, boundless loyalty Lila knew better than anyone. The future, the continuation of a promise. Toward the end of the night, a reporter asked her, "After everything, the rescues, the awards, the books, what's the one thing you want people to remember?" Lila smiled softly, looking toward the statues. That love is never wasted, she said. And loyalty, true loyalty, can change the world, one heart at a time. The crowd grew silent, the weight of her words sinking deep. A child in the front row clutched a stuffed German shepherd toy, eyes shining. A new generation, ready to believe, ready to carry the torch. Late that night, Lila sat alone on the steps of the town hall, the young pup curled at her feet. Above her, the stars spun their ancient dance. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, she felt it again. The solid weight of Blaze leaning against her side, the thump of a tail, the steady, silent vow that had shaped her life. She wasn't alone. She never had been. She never would be. Because some promises never end, some bonds never break, and some legacies, the best ones, are written not in history books, but in the quiet spaces between heartbeats, carried forward. Time, as it always had, moved forward. The town of Willow Creek flourished. The square grew busier each year. Children racing past the twin statues of Blaze and Valor, laughter ringing through the streets. Lila, now older, carried silver streaks in her hair and wisdom in her eyes, but the fire within her remained untamed. She had lived a full life, one marked by service, loyalty, and an unyielding love for every soul who needed protecting. But she knew her journey was nearing its final chapters, and she was ready. One crisp autumn morning, Lila gathered her closest friends, the town's leaders, and every handler she had ever trained. They met in the square, where the air smelled of leaves and the promise of change. A new academy was being built, bigger, better, dedicated to the spirit of canine heroes past, present, and future. Lila stood at the podium, her hands steady, her voice strong. "We are not just building a school," she said. "We are building a legacy." She unveiled a plaque, polished and gleaming in the morning sun. Etched in bold letters, "The Blaze and Valor Academy of Loyalty and Service." The crowd erupted into applause. Tears shone in many eyes. As construction began, Lila spent her days teaching, her nights writing letters to every new recruit, every handler, every dog that would walk through those future doors. Each letter ended the same way: serve with courage, love without fear, and always, always remember, loyalty changes everything. The academy opened 1 year later. Lila, walking slowly now but with pride in every step, cut the ribbon herself. Pups barked excitedly, handlers beamed. The first class bore patches on their uniforms, a silhouette of 2 dogs standing guard, and beneath it, a single word: faithful. Time continued its march. Lila eventually stepped back from public life, retreating to a small cottage on the edge of Willow Creek, overlooking the hills. She spent her days tending a garden, writing, mentoring the occasional young handler who sought her wisdom. And every evening, she would sit on her porch, a cup of tea in hand, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. Often, a young German shepherd, the latest in a long line of protectors, would sit beside her, head resting on her knee. They needed no words, only presence, only trust, only the steady rhythm of loyalty passed from heart to heart. One evening, much like any other, Lila sat watching the stars blink awake. She felt the tug of sleep, deep and gentle. She closed her eyes, and she dreamed. She dreamed of Blaze, running free through golden fields, of Valor trotting loyally at his side, of every dog she had ever loved, every handler she had ever trained, every life touched by a promise once whispered under an old oak tree. In the dream, Blaze turned and looked at her, not with sadness, with joy, with welcome, with the silent invitation to run with him, to laugh, to live forever in the endless fields of loyalty and love. Lila smiled, and in the real world, her last breath was not a farewell. It was a thank you, a promise kept, a journey completed. When the town learned of her passing, they gathered again in the square. The bells rang out, slow and solemn. Candles flickered. Stories were told. Of a girl and her dog. Of a woman and her mission. Of a town forever changed by the quiet, stubborn magic of loyalty. The academy hung a new plaque beside the entrance. It read, "In loving memory of Chief Lila Monroe, protector, teacher, friend, forever faithful." And at the base of Blaze and Valor statues, they placed a third figure, a bronze girl, hand resting lightly on the heads of her two guardians, her face lifted toward the stars. Together, at last. Together, forever. Because true loyalty doesn't end with a lifetime. It echoes across generations. It breathes life into dreams. It stands watch in the quiet hours, unseen but unbroken. It carries forward, in every wagging tail, in every faithful heart, in every act of courage, great and small. It never leaves. It only grows stronger.